welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today is a distinguished writer for the stage, for television and the screen. He's won an Oscar, a special prize at the Cannes Festival. He's best known for his screenplay adaptation of Dangerous Liaisons, for films such as The Honorary Counsel, Secret Agent, The Quiet American. I'm delighted to welcome Christopher Hampton.
Hello.
What brings you to India?
Well, I've always wanted to come to India. It's been high on my list of wishes. And I have a pretext this time, which is that I'm adapting William Dalrymple's book, White Mughals, for the stage, for the National, on commission from the National Theatre, and from an Asian company called Tamasha Theatre Company. They've jointly commissioned this play, and so I thought it would be wrong not to come and immerse myself a little bit before starting work.
You write extensively, both adapting plays, writing screenplays, writing original screenplays, translating. What kind of gratifications does each sort of approach give to you?
Well, I think there are two kinds of writers. There are the writers who plough their groove and get deeper and deeper and have their specific style and so on. But I've always been the other kind of writer, i.e. a bit of a gadfly. And in order, I think, not to get bored with myself, I've tended to go in a lot of different directions. And every so often I try and go in a new direction. A few years ago I directed a film, and this year I wrote the libretto for an opera. I mean, just really to keep myself fresh, I suppose. Because, you know, otherwise I feel the likely would be that you repeat yourself.
Is that sort of impetus to sort of work and play with the form? Does it come out of having something to say, something passionately that you feel and you want to get out of your system, and then you look for forms and structures that will give that expression?
Yes, I do have a certain, I suppose, central backbone of ideas that I want to get across. But I often feel that if you put restrictions on yourself, i.e. if you are adapting something that you need to be faithful to, or you're translating a play by a great writer, you can still, of course you will choose writers that you feel temperamentally akin to, but you can still infiltrate a little something of what you want to say. I mean, so I don't really believe in lecturing audiences or telling them how to think. I think what my aim is to present the piece of work as lucidly as possible and then leave it to them to work out.
I think it was the theatre critic Michael Billington who described you as a romantic amongst classicists.
I think it was the other way around. I think a classicist among romantics, because I think a lot of my contemporaries, certainly in the 70s, were concentrating very much on a moment of political theatre, which really felt, which I sympathized with. I believed the same as many of them did, but as I said just now, feel that you shouldn't really tell audiences what to think. So, and I also have always been very interested in the classics, I suppose, particularly the classics of the theatre. So I've translated 5 plays by Ibsen and 2 plays by Chekhov, and I feel that, you know, 3 plays by Molière, that's what nourishes me and what I want to try to bring to a wider audience. So I think that does make me something of a classicist, although I wouldn't like to think that I was completely, you know, as dry as that description makes me sound.
You know, you obviously wanted to be a writer. That was a motivation from very young.
Yes.
Before you went up to Oxford, you almost had, you virtually had a play written lying in your drawer. And at I think it was 18, you were the youngest person then to have a play performed at the West End.
I think that's right, yes, but I can't quite account for it because my family was much more interested in sports than books, and there were very few books in the house. I think maybe because I was rather a small child with thick glasses, my eyes have fortunately got better since, I found myself sitting in the corner of the room with a book more often than not, and formed the idea, rather sort of ignorantly, I suppose, at the age of 8 or 9, that I wanted to be a writer, which my father was very puzzled, but he was actually very supportive. My parents were very supportive, and never said, you know, I mean, of course they were concerned about whether one could make a living at it, but they never said, you know, this is a ridiculous idea, forget it, do something, you've got to be in a, you know, do something else, or, you know, be a doctor or whatever. They sort of, I think they saw that gleam in my eye and knew that I wasn't going to be dissuaded, really.
But in your pursuit of your vocation as a writer, it's been really to do with writing scripts, drama, screenplay, dialogue,
Yes.
in a sense. What was the unique attraction of that?
The first thing I wrote when I was 16 a novel, a rather long novel, which I then submitted to every publisher in London who all turned it down, quite rightly, actually, because it wasn't very good. But sort of looking back on it, trying to digest this rejection, I noticed that the bits that worked best in the book by far, where the novel seemed to come to life, was in the dialogue. So I thought, in the way one does as a young person without much reflection, I thought, well, I better try a play next time. And as soon as I started to write my first play, I thought, this is what I can do. And it's rather unusual. I mean, you know, there are many more novelists than there are playwrights. And it turned out, I discovered, that the theatre was technically a very difficult medium to write for. But nevertheless, I love doing it, and I love actors, and I love the whole feel of the theatre. And after that, you know, once I'd been in the theatre for a few years, television and the cinema.
You're watching a conversation with the writer Christopher Hampton. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with Christopher Hampton. We were talking about writing for the stage and writing dialogue. In a sense, writing dialogue is the end of a process of you know, internalization and what have you. And there is a great deal that precedes dialogue internally.
Yeah.
So you're really just sort of presenting to audiences or the script that's going to subsequently be realized, the end of a process.
Yes.
How often do you find that the internal processes that you'd imagined or you had projected onto your writing actually get manifest on stage?
Well, I think I've been very lucky. I've worked with very good directors, and I've worked with, you know, some of the best actors that you can imagine. You know, Emma Thompson and Michael Caine and Paul Scofield and you know, Anthony Hopkins and so on and so forth. And so the thing about working with people of that quality is that they actually bring more to your dialogue than you imagine in the first place. So you're in the happy situation of seeing your work taken and made the best of. I mean, occasionally I've had problems, as everybody does, with particular directors, particular productions, and you get very agitated if you see that it's not anywhere near what you had in mind. But I have been very lucky in that respect.
So do you sort of extensively interact as the writer with the director and the actors in the process of production, maybe refining it or changing it?
Yes, we're very lucky in England, because the tradition is the theatre is a writer's theatre.
So it remains a dynamic process.
Yes,
even
so
as
I'm there for the casting, I'm there all the way through the rehearsals, I'm there through the previews, and I can, you know, work with the director and, as you say, make changes. I'm not one for wholesale changes, but I now can sense an audience quite well, so I can see where things are going a bit flat. Because the thing about a play, unlike a novel, is that you can't lose them for 5 minutes. If you lose them for 5 minutes, they don't come back again. They're looking at their watches and wondering, you know, what time the train home is. Whereas a novel, of course, you put it down and try it again tomorrow. So you've got to, you can't relax the quality, really.
But have you sort of ever been tempted to improve upon a play once it's been in production, it's actually being viewed by audience?
Yes, I mean, the the best example of that is my second play, which is a play called Total Eclipse, which was about the French poets Rimbaud and Verlaine.
It also became a play, a film.
It did, but about 25 years later, this is the story. Says I first presented the play to the Royal Court, where I was working, the Royal Court Theatre in London, and the director of the Royal Court said an extraordinary thing. He said, there are a lot of things wrong with this play, but you better see it up on the stage, because then you'll... Which is an inconceivable luxury nowadays. They would say that, you know, you've got teams of script editors and people to tell you what to do all over the place. But in those days, I was young, and he thought it would do me good to see this play, and I could see straight away that there were things wrong with it. So over the years, I reworked it, and then we mounted another production, maybe 12 or 15 years later, directed by David Hare, which was already much better. And then that led to a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, in which I don't think I was very pleased with the outcome, or as pleased as I had hoped. But nevertheless, it was it's that thing that painters have of taking a subject and every 10 years or so having another go. And I wouldn't rule out
another
version in 10 years' time. And there are other plays that I've tinkered with, yes, over the years.
You know, performing a play is dynamic. It changes in every performance. It keeps unfolding, in a sense, with different sort of layers of interpretation, meaning, moods of actors. And
a play is a really unique thing. A play is what's there that evening. It doesn't really have any other existence. It's not like a film is much more like a novel, especially now with DVDs, and you have it on your shelf like a book. But a play is what happens in one room with one set of people on one night, and that's the wonder of it, really, and also the sort of frustration of it, because you know, I have in my head memories of wonderful performances in my plays by Paul Scofield or Ralph Fiennes or, you know, whoever it might be, and they're gone. But nevertheless, it is a beautiful thing.
So do you ever go in there and hold your head and say, my God, what's happening?
I have done, yes. Yes, I had a very sort of love-hate relationship with Germany during the 70s, because a lot of my plays were done in Germany. And in Germany they had the cult of the director, who always felt it incumbent on him to improve whatever miserable text had landed on his desk. And so I had some massive fights with people. And I remember leaving and going to the interval of one play and going to the airport. But it's you know, it's all fair, you know. I mean, it's all what you expect.
So how is it different then, in what ways for you as a writer, when you write for film?
No, writing for film is a completely different thing. When you write for the theatre, if the circumstances are, you know, are good, you can have a fair hope that what arrives on the stage will approximate to what you had in your head. Film, it's like going into the casino. You sit down at the roulette table, you put your chips down, which is your script, and they fall as they may. And sometimes you get a wonderful surprise, as we did with Dangerous Liaison, where I worked with Stephen Frears, who I'd worked with on television, managed to persuade the producers to hire him. And he produced this marvelous film. At other times, you know, you lose the fights, and what's there at the end is not really what you had in mind, and you have to be philosophical about it, because you know, as a writer, you're kidding yourself if you think in film the director is the
So is that sort of what prompted you to sort of direct yourself, Secret Agent?
I became a director completely by accident. I'd written a film called Carrington in the 70s for Warner Brothers, and you know, by the time I'd finished writing it, the executive who'd okayed it had been fired, and so they didn't want to do it. So 15 years later, we got, you know, it all came up again, and we started to prepare it with Mike Newell, who directed For Weddings and a Funeral, as the director, and he cast Emma Thompson and Jonathan Pryce. And then, at the last minute, he suddenly decided he didn't want to do it. He was very, very depressed about Four Weddings and a Funeral. He thought it was going to be a great failure, and he wanted to go away and clear his head, and so he backed away, leaving no choice, really. I mean, honestly, I didn't really want to do it, but the producers said, well, it's either you or after 17 years, it's going to it's not going to be made. And we have the actors, and we have the money, and we're prepared to take a chance with you. So, much to my amazement, I found it was a wonderful process. I really enjoyed it. I had a ball, and it's, of course, it takes up your whole year, and it's very demanding, and it's very nerve-wracking, and all the rest of it. But from time to time, it's something I would like to continue to do, because there's nothing like it. It's like joining the army.
You did The Secret Agent, and you've done other films. What has sort of dissuaded you from doing more of them, and not just sort of staying in complete control of your writing and producing the film? And
I think the films that I've directed 3 now, have all been very personal projects. I mean, I love The Secret Agent, and I didn't. The plan when I first wrote it was that Bob Hoskins was going to direct it and be in it. And at a certain point, he looked at me and I looked at him, and he said, "You want to do this, don't you?" And I said, "I do, Bob, I do." He said, "Oh, all right, go on then," and very generously stepped aside. And but with bigger projects, like I've just written a script from Atonement, the novel by Ian McEwan. It's a very big scale thing. It has recreation of Dunkirk and all kinds of things in it, and I would rather leave that to a seasoned hand like Richard Eyre and be along for the ride, because it's fun to watch and advise and so on. But I would rather do small scale pieces.
You're watching a conversation with the writer Christopher Hampton. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to continuing conversation with the writer Christopher Hampton. The Quiet American,
yes,
was a film that was enormously well received in India. You've had quite a struggle, a process sort of getting it made and getting it distributed.
I think they'd had a struggle before I came on board. I don't think Graham Greene is a very easy author to. In fact, when I did an earlier book of his, The Honorary Consul, he's the only author that I've ever adapted who refused to meet me, so that was rather intimidating.
Did you ever get a sense of how he responded to that film?
Yes, he wrote a very long article denouncing it. If you read the article carefully, you saw the last paragraph that he hadn't actually seen it. I'm told later on he grudgingly admitted that he quite liked it, so that was nice. But Quiet American had been on the stocks for quite a long time, and they'd had various scripts done, and came to me and asked me if I would like to do a rewrite. And I said, no, really, I would like to start from scratch, if you don't mind. I just prefer to, just sit down with the book and do it. So I did it, and quite quickly we cast Michael Caine and Brendan Fraser. And then there was a long period of negotiation struggle about the script, which lasted 9 months or so. And finally there we all were in Vietnam, very exciting, shooting the film, and we were very, very pleased with it eventually. It was one of those projects where conflict led to a good result, which sometimes happens. Sometimes everything goes smoothly, and that's fine, but then the film is rather boring, and this time there was a lot of conflict and robust exchanges with Philip Noyce, the director. But anyway, we were very pleased with it. We previewed it on September the 10th, 2001 in New York, and it was quite well received. However, we all know what happened the next day, and when it was next previewed, I think it was rather raw. I mean, I think to put in front of an American audience something which really accused an American agent of terrorist acts was really a bit hard for them to take. So it was much less well received. Whereupon Miramax, who were releasing it in America, got very uncomfortable with the whole thing. And I think at a certain point decided not to release it at all, just to put it straight to video. And I think it was only the power of Michael Caine, really, who arranged with the Toronto Film Festival to show the film, and then said to Harvey Weinstein, if they don't like it, put it straight to video, but just give it a chance. And it was very, very well received at the Toronto Film Festival, and then, you know, was...
So how often do you have projects that go through convulsions of different kinds? Relationship problems with directors, distributors?
It's not only that, you know, one has a sort of iceberg of unmade projects. I mean, I've probably got 25 screenplays that haven't been made for one reason or another. And that's, you have to take philosophically as well, because you can go right up to the edge, right up to the start, and then something will... There's an infinite number of things that can go wrong with the film.
What are the kind of sort of internal obstructions, or internal challenges that you go through getting what you want to say or write out into the world? Writer's block?
Writer's block I've only had once, and it was very, very frightening, and I got out of it by doing some translation, actually. I suppose I was about 30, and I felt I'd done the first 10 years of work, and I didn't quite know what to do next. And now if I get stuck, I think I must just think of something completely other direction to go in. And so writer's block, touch wood, hasn't been a problem for quite a while now. But it is. I mean, some projects I have a penchant for difficult subjects, because I think they are the things that bring the best out of you. And sometimes when I do a project that sort of comes easily, I feel uncomfortable about it, and I never feel very affectionate towards it afterwards, as I do towards the ones that have really had to be squeezed out in agony, you know.
You know, when you're writing now, you're really no longer writing for just a local audience in Britain or in the United States. With the globalization of media and culture, you're really, in a sense, writing for a global audience. The work that you write is seen in India, it's seen in Vietnam, it's seen in Europe, and where have you. How conscious are you of that?
Well, I welcome that in a way. I mean, my father worked for a company called Cable and Wireless, and so I was brought up mostly as a small child in Egypt, and then subsequently in Hong Kong. And I've always been very interested in other cultures, and very interested in understanding other cultures. I mean, I do think that another of the reasons that Quiet American was met with some dismay was that it was a film that clearly said, do not go and invade another country when you don't know enough about it. When you know nothing about... You cannot embark on that sort of military adventure in ignorance, which is something, unfortunately, that the Americans are very prone to do. And I'm very interested in the notion of what links cultures as opposed to what divides them. What divides them is very interesting as well, and often very dramatic.
So what discoveries are you making here in India and working on this novel?
Well, India is sort of overwhelming. It's wonderful, and I've been traveling around, going to places like Goa and Pune and Aurangabad, and I went to the Ajanta caves, which are as beautiful as anything in Greece or Rome, I think. So I'm just kind of laying myself open at the moment. I'm at the beginning of this particular project, but I do like to do that. I mean, I went and spent quite a long time in Vietnam before the Quiet American, and it is something I'm very interested in doing more of.
Was there a grab? Was there something that sort of excited you about this project that prompted you to take it on?
Yes, it's when you read a book and you can't forget it afterwards. It's sort of, there's some sort of hook that, and you think that's really very, very interesting, and there's something in there. You don't necessarily know what it is, but you have to trust the instinct. I mean, generally speaking, you don't know, in my experience, what a play or a piece is about until you've almost finished it, or maybe even after you've finished it. Because it sort of, if it goes well, it sort of tells you what it's about. And of course you plan as carefully as you can, but that doesn't necessarily get you to the heart of the... So it's a bit like being attracted to a person. You know, you think, well, that person is very attractive, but you don't quite know why. Later on, you either do or you don't. But it's that sort of process.
You're a distinguished writer. You perhaps in some ways, you know, your reputation is globally outside the English-speaking world in some ways, is really with your skill in doing adaptations.
Yes.
And you're working with other people's ideas and
Yes.
writings and translating novels, as you will be doing here with the White Mughals. What are the challenges in condensing something so vast and detailed in its narrative into sort of the almost cryptic language of a script?
That's the job. The job is to really go in with a machete and carve out what's in the center of the rock, really, somehow or another. And you know, those are skills that you hope you've gathered over the years. I partly do a lot of adaptations because I like to work all the time. I mean, I've turned from, I was rather idle in my 20s, but I'm now a sort of workaholic. And I think that I like to have something that I know I can work on. With my own pieces, I usually have an original piece on the go, as it were. But that will take anything from 2 to 5 years. And you know, in order not to go mad during the 2 to 5 years, it's very nice to focus on outside pieces of work. I mean, my last play was about Freud and Jung, which we did at the National Theatre with Ralph Fiennes, and hoped we might do a film of. And that took 5 years. And it didn't take 5 continuous years because I was doing other things to keep myself sane in between.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you had maybe 25 scripts waiting to be written. What's the most sort of urgent one? What's sort of putting the most pressure on you to come out and be articulated?
I think that there are various things on the stockpile. I'm very interested in, actually I have a strange idea, which is to take Hedda Gabler, the Ibsen play, which I translated many, many years ago, and rework it as a movie, but set it in the 50s in New Orleans. So it would be like filtering Ibsen through Tennessee Williams, and I just have an instinct that might work. So that's the sort of you know, the project that's interesting me the most at the moment. I'm also become very interested in the French writer Colette, the woman who died in the 60s and wrote Gigi and many others.
Do writers such as you ever retire?
I hope not. I mean, there's no money if you do. But anyway, I really don't want to retire. I have seen no prospect of doing it.
Christopher Hampton, thank you very much. This
Thanks.
has been a great pleasure.